On our honeymoon, my husband whispered another woman's name in his sleep. When I realized it was my sister's, I knew my entire marriage was a lie. I'm not the kind of person who jumps to conclusions. I've always been the rational one, the one who thinks things through, who gives people the benefit of the doubt. But there are some things you just can't unhear. Some words that burn themselves into your brain and change everything. My name's Claire, and 3 weeks ago, I married the man I thought was my soulmate in a ceremony that looked like it was pulled straight out of a bridal magazine. White roses everywhere, the ocean as our backdrop. 200 guests who couldn't stop telling me how lucky I was. My family loved Ryan. God, they loved him. Especially Morgan, my younger sister, who stood next to me as my maid of honor. Tears streaming down her face as I said I do. I thought those were happy tears. We were supposed to spend 2 weeks in Santorini, the Greek islands, the blue-domed churches, the romance of it all. It was going to be perfect. It was perfect, actually, for about 36 hours. Then, on our second night, as I lay next to my new husband in a suite overlooking the Aegean Sea, I heard it. Soft, barely audible, like a secret he was trying to keep even in his dreams. Morgan, ... double quotes. My heart stopped. I told myself I'd imagined it. Stress, jet lag, too much wine at dinner. But the seed was planted, and seeds like that don't just disappear. They grow. The next morning at breakfast, he called me by her name. Just slipped right out of his mouth as naturally as breathing. Morgan, could you pass the coffee? Then that nervous laugh, that quick correction. Sorry, babe, I'm still half asleep. But he wasn't. His eyes were clear. And I saw something flicker across his face before he caught himself. Something that looked an awful lot like guilt. By the time it happened a third time at dinner, with candlelight between us and violins playing in the background, I wasn't surprised anymore. I was just numb. Morgan, you look beautiful tonight. He reached for my hand across the table, and I pulled away like I'd been burned. That's when I started crying. Not the delicate, pretty kind of crying. The ugly kind. The kind that comes from somewhere deep and broken inside you. The kind that tells you nothing will ever be the same. I need to tell you this whole story, every twisted detail of it, because what I discovered next changed everything I thought I knew about love, family, and trust. This isn't just about a man who said the wrong name. It's so much darker than that, and honestly, I'm still processing how close I came to losing everything. This is a long and painful journey, and I could use a friend to walk through it with me. If you want to hear how this nightmare unfolded and what I did to fight back, you can follow along with the stories here. That way, you won't miss what happened next. Because trust me, it gets worse before it gets better. I didn't confront Ryan that night at dinner. I couldn't. My throat was too tight, my mind was racing too fast. And honestly, I wasn't ready to hear whatever lie he was going to tell me. Instead, I excused myself from the table. Told him I had a migraine, and locked myself in the bathroom for 20 minutes while he knocked softly on the door asking if I was okay. I wasn't okay. I was replaying every interaction between Ryan and Morgan over the past year. Every family dinner where they sat next to each other. Every time she volunteered to help him with something. Every inside joke I thought was just them getting along as future siblings. The signs were there. I just hadn't been looking. When I finally came out, Ryan was sitting on the edge of the bed with this concerned expression that now felt like a mask. He asked if I wanted to go home early, if I needed to see a doctor, if there was anything he could do. I told him I just needed sleep. He held me that night, his arm draped over my waist, and I lay there stiff as a board, staring at the moonlight on the water, wondering who the hell I just married. The next morning, I made a decision. I couldn't spend the rest of this trip falling apart. I needed to know the truth, and I needed evidence. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I went through his phone. Ryan was in the shower, singing some Bruno Mars song like he didn't have a care in the world. His phone was charging on the nightstand, face down, which should have been my first clue. My hands were shaking so badly, I almost dropped it twice. I knew his passcode because he'd given it to me months ago, back when we were still in that honeymoon phase of the relationship where everything was open and honest. Or so I thought. I opened his messages first. Nothing from Morgan. That seemed strange. My sister texted me constantly, sent me memes and voice notes and updates about her day, but in Ryan's phone, not a single message from her. They'd been deleted. All of them. But he'd forgotten about his recently deleted folder. My stomach dropped as I scrolled through. There were dozens of messages between them, some from as recent as 2 days ago. The morning of our wedding, Morgan had sent him a text that made my blood run cold. She told him to relax, that everything would work out exactly as they planned, and that she'd see him soon. See him soon? She was my maid of honor. Of course she'd see him soon, but something about the tone felt wrong. Too intimate. Too familiar. I kept scrolling, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. There were references to meetings, to being careful, to keeping things quiet just a little longer. And then I found the message that confirmed my worst fear. Morgan had sent him a photo. It was from that family barbecue last summer, the one at my mom's house where Ryan first met most of my extended family. In the picture, Morgan was laughing at something. Her hand on Ryan's arm, and he was looking at her like she was the only person in the world. Underneath the photo, she'd written something that made me want to throw up. She told him she couldn't wait until they didn't have to hide anymore, that it was getting harder to pretend she was happy for us. The shower turned off. I had maybe 90 seconds before Ryan came out. I quickly took photos of the messages with my own phone, deleted the evidence that I'd been snooping, and put his phone back exactly where I'd found it. Then I grabbed my book from the nightstand and pretended to read, even though the words were just blurry shapes on the page. Ryan came out wrapped in a towel, water dripping from his hair, and smiled at me. Asked me if I was feeling better. I smiled back and told him yes, much better, and suggested we spend the day exploring the island. I played the role of the happy newlywed perfectly, laughing at his jokes, holding his hand, taking pictures for Instagram that made us look like the perfect couple. But inside, I was already planning my next move. That afternoon, while Ryan was napping on the beach, I called my best friend Rachel back home. She's a lawyer, the sharp kind who doesn't take anyone's crap, and I knew she'd tell me exactly what I needed to hear. I gave her the basics without falling apart. Told her about the name calling, about the deleted messages, about the photo. Rachel didn't waste time with sympathy. She told me to come home immediately, to not let on that I knew anything, and to start documenting everything. She also told me something that made my blood run cold. She said that in her experience, when someone goes to this much trouble to hide a relationship, there's usually more to the story than just an affair. There's almost always money involved. Money? Ryan had always been vague about his finances. He told me he ran a consulting business, that he had clients all over the country. That money wasn't something I needed to worry about. He paid for dinners, bought me expensive gifts, and when we got engaged, he insisted on a joint account for wedding expenses. A joint account I'd funded with $40,000 from my inheritance. Suddenly, everything clicked into place. The rushed engagement after only 6 months of dating. His eagerness to get married quickly, the way he'd suggested combining our finances after the wedding, how he'd asked me, just casually, about the trust fund my father had left me. This wasn't just an affair. This was a plan. I hung up with Rachel and stared out at the ocean, watching Ryan sleep peacefully on his lounge chair, completely unaware that his perfect scheme was about to fall apart. I felt something shift inside me. The hurt was still there, raw and bleeding, but underneath it was something harder, something cold and focused. I wasn't going to cry anymore. I was going to fight. That evening at dinner, I told Ryan I wasn't feeling well again. Told him I thought maybe I'd picked up a bug, that I should probably go home and see my doctor. He put on such a convincing show of concern, offering to come with me, to cancel the rest of the trip. But I could see the relief in his eyes when I told him to stay, to enjoy the vacation, that there was no reason for both of us to miss out. He tried to argue, but not very hard. 2 days later, I was on a plane back to Boston. Alone, Ryan stayed in Greece, supposedly to make the most of the prepaid resort, but I knew better. I knew exactly what he was doing. Or rather, who he was planning to do it with. And while he thought he was getting away with it, I was about to burn his entire world to the ground. The first thing I did when I landed at Logan Airport was call Marcus Webb. Rachel had given me his number on the plane. Told me he was the best private investigator in Boston and that he owed her a favor. I met him at a coffee shop in Cambridge 2 hours after my flight landed. Still wearing my sundress from Santorini, my skin tan but my eyes hollow. Marcus was nothing like I expected. No trench coat, no fedora, just a regular guy in his 50s with kind eyes and a wedding ring. He ordered us both coffee and listened without interrupting while I spilled everything. The names in the night, the deleted messages, the photo, my suspicions about money. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment, then asked me one question that changed everything. He wanted to know if I'd noticed Ryan and Morgan spending time alone together before the wedding. The memories hit me like a freight train. Morgan offering to help Ryan pick out his tuxedo, the two of them disappearing during my bridal shower to grab more ice. Ryan's car parked outside Morgan's apartment building one night when I drove by on my way home from work. He'd told me he was meeting a client in that neighborhood. I'd believed him. God, I'd been so blind. Marcus told me he'd need 72 hours. He made me promise not to contact Ryan, not to let on that anything was wrong, to act completely normal. So that's what I did. I texted Ryan that I'd made it home safely, that the doctor said it was just food poisoning, that I missed him. He sent back a string of heart emojis and told me he'd be home in 4 days. 4 days. That's all the time Marcus needed to destroy my entire world. I spent those days in a fog, going through the motions. I showed up at work, smiled at my coworkers, pretended everything was fine. At night, I'd lie in our bed, the one Ryan and I had picked out together at that fancy furniture store, and I'd stare at the ceiling, trying not to imagine him with my sister, trying not to wonder how long they'd been laughing at me behind my back. On the third day, Marcus called. His voice was different, heavier, and I knew before he said anything that it was bad. He asked if I could come to his office, told me I'd want to be sitting down for this. I drove there in rush hour traffic, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. Marcus's office was in a plain brick building in Somerville. Third floor, no receptionist. He opened the door before I could knock, and the look on his face told me I'd been right to be terrified. He'd prepared a folder, a thick one. He sat across from me at his desk and slid it over like it was evidence in a murder trial. In a way, I guess it was the murder of everything I thought I knew. The first photos were exactly what I expected. Ryan and Morgan together, holding hands in the parking lot of a Best Western off Route 95, kissing outside a TJ Maxx where Morgan worked as a store manager, getting into Ryan's car at 2 in the afternoon on a Tuesday when he was supposedly in New York meeting clients. The timestamps went back 8 months. 8 months. That meant it started in June. Right after that barbecue at my mom's house, I felt sick, but I kept looking. Marcus had notes attached to each photo. Dates, times, locations. He'd been thorough, professional. He probably had no idea he was documenting the complete destruction of my life. But then I got to page 12, and everything got so much worse. Marcus had done a deep financial background check on Ryan, the kind that costs extra but reveals everything. And what he found made the affair look like a minor detail. Ryan was broke. Not just struggling, not just having a bad year, completely, catastrophically broke. His consulting business was a shell company with no actual clients. He'd been living off credit cards and personal loans for the past 3 years. He had over $200,000 in debt. His apartment, the nice one in Back Bay that I'd been so impressed by, rented the BMW. Leased and 2 payments behind. Even his Rolex was a knockoff. Everything about him was a lie, but Marcus had found something even more damning. Bank records showing that Ryan had been researching me long before we met. He'd looked up my father's obituary, found out about the inheritance, tracked down my social media. Our meeting at that charity gala hadn't been chance. It had been calculated. I met my husband the way people meet in romantic comedies. At a fundraiser for children's literacy, both of us reaching for the same glass of champagne, laughing about it. He'd seemed so charming, so genuine. He told me he'd never believed in love at first sight until that moment. It was all a setup. He'd bought a ticket to that event specifically because he knew I'd be there. He'd planned the whole thing. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the folder. Marcus pushed a box of tissues across the desk, but I wasn't crying. I was too angry to cry, too shocked, too busy trying to understand how someone could be this calculated, this cruel. But Marcus wasn't done. He flipped to the last section of the folder, and his voice got even quieter. He told me that Morgan wasn't just having an affair with Ryan. She was his partner in the scheme. The evidence was undeniable. Text messages Marcus had pulled from phone records showed them planning everything. How Ryan would sweep me off my feet. How quickly he should propose. Which of my assets were most liquid. Morgan had fed him information about my finances, about my relationship with my mother, about my insecurities and fears. She'd told him exactly how to make me fall in love with him. There was a message from Morgan sent the week before the wedding. She told Ryan she was proud of him, that he'd played his part perfectly, and that once he got access to my trust fund, they could disappear together. She'd even picked out the destination. Some beach town in Mexico where extradition was complicated. They were going to rob me and vanish. My baby sister? The girl I'd protected from bullies in middle school. The one I'd helped pay for community college when she couldn't afford tuition. The person I trusted more than almost anyone in the world. She'd sold me out for a con man with a fake Rolex and a mountain of debt. I sat in that office for over an hour, reading every page, studying every photo, letting the full scope of their betrayal sink into my bones. Marcus stayed quiet, letting me process, occasionally refilling my water glass. When I finally looked up at him, I wasn't the same person who'd walked in. Something had hardened inside me, crystallized. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was someone who'd been underestimated, and that was their biggest mistake. I asked Marcus how much time I had before Ryan tried to access my accounts. He checked his notes and told me that based on the messages, Ryan was planning to move the money within 2 weeks of the wedding. We were currently on day 17. I was almost out of time. That's when I made the call that changed everything. I pulled out my phone, scrolled to Rachel's number, and asked her to meet me immediately. Then I looked at Marcus and said something I never thought I'd hear myself say. I told him I needed him to keep following them. Every move, every meeting, every lie. I needed a complete record of everything they'd done. Because I wasn't just going to divorce Ryan and cut off Morgan. I was going to make them pay for every single thing they'd stolen from me. My money, my trust, my family, my future. They thought they were so smart. Thought I was just some naive girl with a trust fund and a broken heart who'd roll over and take it. They had no idea what was coming for them. Ryan came home on a Thursday afternoon, tanned and relaxed, carrying a bag of souvenirs and wearing that smile I used to love. The smile I now knew was as fake as everything else about him. He dropped his luggage in the hallway, swept me into his arms, and told me how much he'd missed me. His lips tasted like lies. I kissed him back. That's the thing nobody tells you about betrayal. Sometimes the hardest part isn't discovering it. It's pretending you don't know. It's looking into the eyes of someone who destroyed you and acting like you still believe every word they say. It's performing love when all you feel is rage. But I'd made a promise to Marcus and Rachel. No confrontations, no tipping my hand. I needed more time to protect my assets, to build my case, to make sure that when I struck, it would be devastating and final. So I became an actress, and I gave the performance of my life. I asked Ryan about Greece, listened to him describe the beaches and the sunsets, nodded in all the right places. He'd brought me a beautiful silk scarf from a local market, told me he'd thought of me when he saw it. The price tag was still attached. 12 euros, about 13 bucks. My husband, who was trying to steal $2 million from me, couldn't even spring for a decent souvenir. That night, we had dinner with my mother. She'd insisted on a welcome home meal, wanted to hear all about the honeymoon. Morgan was there too, of course. Sitting across from me in my childhood dining room, asking how Santorini was, if it was as romantic as everyone said. Her eyes were wide and innocent, her voice sugary sweet. I wanted to throw my wine in her face. Instead, I smiled and told her it was beautiful. Told her that Ryan and I had such a magical time. I watched her and Ryan carefully, looking for any sign of connection, any secret glance or hidden meaning. They were good. I had to give them that. They barely looked at each other all night. Morgan focused on her phone, complaining about some issue at work. Ryan chatted with my mom about his business, spinning elaborate stories about clients and contracts that didn't exist. But then, right as dessert was being served, it happened. My mom mentioned that she'd run into Ryan's car at the grocery store last week, said she'd waved, but he must not have seen her. She laughed about it, made a joke about him being in his own world. Ryan's face didn't change, but I saw his hand tighten around his fork, saw the quick glance he shot at Morgan. My mother had seen him the day I was in Santorini, the day Marcus's surveillance photos showed him at that motel with Morgan. He'd told me he was in New York that day. Told me he had back-to-back meetings. I filed that information away and kept eating my tiramisu. After dinner, Morgan pulled me aside in the kitchen while we were washing dishes. She asked if everything was okay between Ryan and me, said I seemed distant. Her concern was so practiced, so perfectly calibrated. She put her hand on my arm, that same hand I'd seen in Marcus's photos wrapped around Ryan's waist, and told me that marriage was an adjustment, but we'd figure it out. I thanked her for caring so much. Then she said something that made my blood run cold. She told me that if I ever needed to talk about anything, about money stuff or marriage stuff or whatever, she was there for me. Said she knew how complicated things could get when you were managing an inheritance and a new husband at the same time. I'd never told Morgan the exact amount of my inheritance. Never discussed the specifics of the trust fund. But somehow, she knew. She knew because Ryan had told her. Because they'd planned this together, calculated every move, every manipulation. I looked at my little sister, at her fake smile and her crocodile tears, and something shifted. The hurt started turning into something else. Something colder and sharper. I told her I appreciated it, that I was so lucky to have her in my life. She hugged me, actually hugged me, and I stood there in my mother's kitchen, my sister's arms around me, and I thought about all the ways I was going to take her down, along with Ryan. The next few days were a masterclass in deception. Ryan started talking about our finances more openly, suggesting we set up joint accounts now that we were married. He framed it as romantic, as a symbol of our commitment. Told me that his accountant recommended it for tax purposes. He was so smooth, so convincing. If I hadn't known better, I might have actually fallen for it. I told him it sounded like a great idea. Told him I'd need a few days to talk to my financial advisor to make sure we did everything properly. The relief on his face was obvious. He thought he was winning. But while Ryan was planning to drain my accounts, I was 3 steps ahead. Rachel had already helped me move my trust fund into a separate account he couldn't access. We'd frozen all joint assets. We'd documented every fraudulent statement he'd made, every lie about his finances, every forged document he'd used to appear successful. I was building a case that would bury him. One night, about a week after he got back, Ryan's phone buzzed while he was in the shower. He'd left it on the nightstand, face down as always. I picked it up and saw Morgan's name on the screen. The message preview was brief but telling. She wanted to know when they were going to move forward with the next phase. The next phase, they had phases. This was a multi-step operation, and I'd only uncovered part of it. I quickly snapped a photo of the notification before Ryan came out. When he emerged, towel around his waist, water dripping down his chest, he looked at me looking at his phone. For just a second, I saw panic flash across his face. I held up the phone and told him his mom had texted. His shoulders relaxed immediately. He thanked me, took the phone, and quickly checked his messages. I watched him delete something, watched his fingers move fast across the screen, watched him compose his face back into that mask of casual innocence, but he'd made a mistake, a big one. In his rush to delete Morgan's message, he'd forgotten to switch apps first. For just a moment, I saw his banking app was open, and in that brief glimpse, I saw enough. A money transfer interface, a routing number, and an amount that made my stomach drop. He wasn't planning to steal $2 million. He was planning to take everything, every single asset I had, the trust fund, the investment accounts, even the small inheritance from my grandmother that I'd put into bonds. He'd mapped out my entire financial life, and he was planning to empty it all at once. Ryan caught me staring, asked if everything was okay. I smiled and told him I was just admiring my incredibly handsome husband. He grinned, kissed my forehead, and told me he was the lucky one. That night, while Ryan slept next to me, I lay awake staring at the ceiling and doing math, adding up everything they'd stolen, not just money, but time, trust, love, family. Years of my life I'd never get back. Holidays ruined, memories poisoned. My relationship with my mother, which would never be the same when she found out what Morgan had done. But I also thought about what Ryan and Morgan didn't know. They didn't know about Marcus watching their every move. They didn't know about Rachel building a legal case that would follow them for years. They didn't know that every conversation we had was being documented, every lie recorded. They didn't know that the naive girl they'd targeted had become someone else entirely. Ryan shifted in his sleep, his arm draping over me like he had the right to touch me. Like he wasn't the worst mistake I'd ever made. I carefully moved his arm away and got up, walked to the window, looked out at the Boston skyline glittering in the darkness. Tomorrow, I'd call Rachel and tell her what I'd seen. We'd move up the timeline. We'd make our move before Ryan could strike first, because I'd just realized something crucial. Ryan's biggest mistake wasn't the affair. It wasn't even the con. His biggest mistake was thinking I wouldn't fight back. The next morning, I called in sick to work. Ryan had left early for a meeting he claimed was in Cambridge, but Marcus had already texted me the truth. Ryan was meeting Morgan at a Dunkin' Donuts in Quincy, the kind of unremarkable location where no one we knew would spot them. I spent that hour in our apartment, drinking coffee that tasted like acid, waiting for Rachel to arrive. She showed up at 9 with a briefcase and the kind of determined look that made me understand why she'd never lost a case. We sat at my kitchen table, the same one where Ryan and I had eaten breakfast together just hours ago, and she laid out the reality of my situation in terms I couldn't ignore. Rachel explained that what Ryan and Morgan had done wasn't just morally wrong, it was criminal. Fraud, conspiracy, identity theft if they'd tried to open accounts in my name, but prosecuting them would be hard without catching them in the act. We needed to let them make their move, but in a way, we controlled completely. That's when she told me what we had to do. I needed to give them access. Not to the real money, but to a trap. Rachel had already set up a dummy account with just enough in it to look legitimate. $50,000. We'd transfer it from one of my smaller investment accounts, make it look like I was consolidating funds. Then we'd give Ryan the access codes and wait for him to take the bait. The idea made me physically sick. Letting him think he was winning. Giving him even $1 of my money, even temporarily. But Rachel was right. We needed him to commit the crime where we could prove it, document it, use it to nail him in both criminal and civil court. I agreed. But first, I needed to understand something that had been eating at me since I saw Marcus's folder. I asked Rachel why. Why would Morgan do this? We weren't close like some sisters, but we weren't enemies either. I'd helped her through breakups, lent her money, she never paid back. Given her a place to stay when she'd fought with our mom. What could Ryan have possibly offered her that was worth destroying our family? Rachel was quiet for a moment. Then she told me something that made everything click into place. In her experience, people like Morgan didn't do this for love or money alone. They did it for something deeper. Resentment, jealousy, the feeling of being second best their entire lives. And suddenly, I saw it. Every childhood memory reframed. Morgan was always the pretty one, the charming one, the one everyone wanted to be around. But I was the successful one. The one who got into a good college, landed a great job, inherited dad's money. Morgan had dropped out of community college, bounced between retail jobs, lived paycheck to paycheck. I'd never thought of myself as having more than her, but in her eyes, I'd had everything. And she'd spent years watching me, resenting me, waiting for a chance to take something that was mine. Then Ryan came along. Smart, handsome, ambitious Ryan, who saw in Morgan a kindred spirit. Someone as empty and hollow as he was. Someone willing to hurt the people who loved her for a taste of something she thought she deserved. They'd found each other. Two broken people who decided that instead of fixing themselves, they'd just destroy me. Understanding their motivation didn't make it hurt less, but it did make me more determined. Rachel asked if I was ready to move forward, to set the trap and watch them walk into it. I told her I was more than ready. We spent the next 3 hours going over every detail. Rachel had drafted documents that would transfer the dummy account into joint ownership with Ryan. I'd present it as a gesture of trust, of commitment to our marriage. She coached me on exactly what to say, how to act, where to sign. We practiced until I could deliver the lines without my voice shaking. Then came the hard part, the financial investigation. Rachel had brought along a forensic accountant named David Chin. He was young, maybe 30, with thick glasses and an energy drink habit. But Rachel swore he was the best, that he could track money through a dozen shell companies and offshore accounts. I gave him access to everything. Every bank statement, every credit card bill, every piece of financial documentation I had on Ryan. David worked at my dining room table for 5 hours straight, barely speaking, just typing and scrolling and occasionally muttering under his breath. I sat on the couch pretending to watch TV, but really, I was watching him. Trying to read his expressions, trying to gauge how bad it was going to be. When he finally looked up, his face told me everything. It was worse than Marcus had found. So much worse. David explained it to me in terms I could understand. Ryan hadn't just lied about his finances. He'd been actively stealing for months. Small amounts at first, a transfer here, a charge there. Things I wouldn't notice in the daily flow of expenses. He'd been using our joint wedding account as his personal piggy bank, taking out cash and funneling it to Morgan. But the real revelation was what David found when he dug deeper into Ryan's background. This wasn't Ryan's first con. He'd done this before. Twice. David had found records of 2 previous engagements, one in Philadelphia 3 years ago, to a woman named Amanda Cho, one in Seattle 5 years before that, to someone named Rebecca Torres. Both relationships had ended abruptly right around the time Ryan would have needed to show financial transparency. Both women had filed restraining orders. Neither had pressed charges, probably because they were too embarrassed or traumatized. Ryan was a professional. This was what he did. He found women with money, made them fall in love, got as close to their finances as possible, then disappeared before they could catch on. I was just his latest mark. The only difference was that this time, he'd brought an accomplice. This time, he'd gotten someone's sister to help him. I felt the room spin. Rachel put her hand on my shoulder, grounded me. She told me to breathe, that we had him now, that this pattern of behavior would destroy him in court. But all I could think about was how stupid I'd been. How I'd ignored every red flag, every warning sign, every instinct that told me something was off. I'd been so desperate to believe in the fairy tale that I'd ignored reality. David packed up his laptop and told me he'd have a full report by tomorrow. Rachel said she'd file for an emergency freeze on all marital assets first thing in the morning. We were moving into the endgame now. Everything was about to accelerate. After they left, I sat alone in my apartment and let myself feel it. All of it. The betrayal, the humiliation, the rage. I cried for the first time since I'd seen Marcus's folder. Not delicate tears, but the kind of sobbing that comes from your gut that shakes your whole body. I cried for the woman I'd been before all this. The one who believed in love and family and trust. That woman was gone. She'd died somewhere between Santorini and this moment, and I wasn't sure I'd ever get her back. But when I was done crying, when my eyes were swollen and my throat was raw, I felt something else. Something hard and cold and absolutely certain. Ryan and Morgan had taken so much from me. My trust, my innocence, my belief in basic human decency. But they'd also given me something. They'd given me clarity, purpose, a reason to fight that was bigger than just protecting my money. I was going to make sure they never did this to anyone else. That evening, Ryan came home late with Thai food and apologies. Told me his meeting had run over, that he'd lost track of time. I smiled and thanked him for dinner. We ate on the couch, watching some mindless show, his hand on my knee like we were a normal couple having a normal night. And the whole time, I was thinking about tomorrow. About the trap we were setting, about watching him take the bait and seal his own fate. Ryan asked me what I was smiling about. I told him I was just happy. Happy to have him home, happy to be married, happy with our life together. He kissed my forehead and told me he loved me. I kissed him back and lied just as smoothly. Told him I loved him too. We were both performing now, both playing roles. The only difference was that I knew how this play ended, and it wasn't going to be pretty. 3 days later, I sat across from Ryan at our kitchen table with the papers Rachel had prepared spread out between us. I'd rehearsed this moment 100 times in my head, practiced the right tone, the right expressions. I needed to sell this completely. One wrong word, one flicker of doubt in my eyes, and he'd know something was off. I told him I'd been thinking about what he said, about combining our finances, about being a real team. I pushed the papers toward him and explained that I'd set up a joint account, that I was ready to take that step. My voice was steady, warm even. I was channeling the old me, the one who'd trusted him completely. The look on his face was everything I needed to see. Pure, undiluted triumph. He tried to hide it, tried to play it cool, but I saw it. That flash of victory in his eyes, he thought he'd won. Ryan reached across the table and took my hand, rubbed his thumb over my knuckles. He told me this meant everything to him, that he was so proud of me for taking this leap of faith. He made it sound romantic, like I was doing something beautiful instead of handing a thief the keys to my house. We signed the papers together. His signature was confident, sprawling. Mine was smaller, neater, both of us lying in our own ways. That night, Rachel texted me confirmation. The account was live. $50,000 sitting there like bait in a trap. Now we just had to wait for Ryan to make his move. Marcus was on standby, ready to document everything. David had set up alerts that would notify us the moment any transaction occurred. All the pieces were in place. But while I waited for Ryan to strike, I made a decision. I needed to understand Morgan's role in this more completely. I needed to hear her voice, see her face, confirm that she was as guilty as the evidence suggested. Part of me, some stupid hopeful part, still wondered if maybe she'd been manipulated too. If maybe Ryan had used her the same way he'd used me. I called her the next morning, asked if she wanted to grab lunch, just the two of us. Sisters catching up. She sounded surprised, but happy. Told me she'd been worried about me, that I'd seemed off at Mom's house. We agreed to meet at this little Italian place in the North End that we used to go to as kids. I got there early and sat at a corner table where I could see the door. I dressed carefully. Nothing too formal, nothing that would make her suspicious. Just jeans and a sweater, my hair pulled back, minimal makeup. I looked tired, which wasn't hard because I hadn't slept more than 3 hours a night since I'd gotten back from Greece. Morgan walked in 15 minutes late, which was typical for her. She'd always been the kind of person who operated on her own schedule, who expected the world to wait. She hugged me tight when she reached the table, and I let her. I even hugged back. We ordered salads and wine, made small talk about work and Mom and the weather. Morgan complained about her job, about her boss, about how she was barely making ends meet. The irony wasn't lost on me. She was planning to steal my inheritance while sitting across from me, pretending to be broke. Then she asked about Ryan, how married life was treating me. If we were happy, I told her we were adjusting. That marriage was harder than I expected. That sometimes I felt like I didn't know my husband at all. Morgan's eyes flickered with something. Interest? Satisfaction. She leaned forward and asked what I meant. Her concern was so practiced, so fake, and yet somehow she made it look genuine. She'd always been good at that. Good at making people believe she cared. I told her that Ryan had been distant lately, that he spent a lot of time on his phone, took calls in other rooms, seemed distracted. I made myself vulnerable, let my voice crack a little. I was giving her an opening, a chance to come clean, to tell me the truth. Instead, Morgan doubled down. She told me that all men went through phases, that Ryan was probably just stressed about work. She reminded me how lucky I was to have found someone like him, someone successful and handsome who clearly adored me. Successful. That word hit me like a slap. She knew Ryan was broke. She knew everything about him was a lie. And she was sitting there encouraging me to trust him, to ignore my instincts, to walk blindly into their trap. That's when I knew for certain. Morgan wasn't a victim. She was a willing participant, maybe even the architect. I excused myself to go to the bathroom, and on my way there, I texted Rachel, told her to move forward with everything we'd planned. I was done giving them chances, done hoping for redemption. When I came back to the table, Morgan was on her phone texting someone. She put it away quickly when she saw me, but not before I caught a glimpse of the name on the screen. Ryan. She was texting my husband during our lunch, probably telling him how the conversation was going, whether I suspected anything, if the trap was holding. We finished our meal making more fake conversation. Morgan told me she was thinking about taking a vacation soon, that she needed to get away. Asked if I knew any good beach towns in Mexico. I suggested Cabo, watched her eyes light up, and knew I'd just confirmed what Marcus had found in their messages. Mexico. That's where they were planning to run. When we said goodbye outside the restaurant, Morgan hugged me again. Told me she loved me, that she'd always be there for me. I hugged her back and told her the same thing. Both of us performing sisterhood while planning each other's destruction. I walked back to my car and sat there for 10 minutes, gripping the steering wheel, trying to process what I'd just experienced. My sister. My baby sister who I'd protected and supported and loved. She'd looked me in the eyes and lied without even flinching. That's when my phone buzzed. A text from David? Activity on the account? Ryan had just logged in. My heart started racing. This was it, the moment we'd been waiting for. I called Rachel immediately, put her on speaker, and drove straight to her office. By the time I got there, David was already on his laptop, tracking everything in real time. Ryan had transferred $20,000 to an account I didn't recognize. David traced it in seconds. A bank in the Cayman Islands, an offshore account in Morgan's name. We had him, but David held up his hand, told us to wait. Ryan was still online, still moving. He was trying to access my trust fund account, the real one, the one we'd locked down. We watched him try password after password, getting denied each time. Rachel recorded everything. Every failed attempt, every illegal access. This was evidence of attempted theft, of fraud, of conspiracy. This was enough to destroy him in court and send him to prison. After 20 minutes, Ryan gave up. He closed his laptop, probably thinking he'd try again later, probably believing he still had time, that I was still his naive mark. David looked at me with something like awe. He told me that in 15 years of forensic accounting, he'd never seen someone walk this willingly into such a comprehensive trap. But I didn't feel triumphant. I felt hollow. Because watching those numbers move across the screen, watching Ryan steal from me in real time, made it all real in a way it hadn't been before. This wasn't just suspicion anymore. This wasn't just evidence gathered by strangers. This was my husband actively robbing me. This was my sister helping him do it. Rachel asked if I was okay. I told her I was fine, but we both knew I was lying. That evening, I went home to the apartment I shared with Ryan and acted like nothing had changed. He was already there, cooking dinner, humming some song I used to think was sweet. He kissed me when I walked in, asked about my day, told me about his... Every word out of his mouth was a lie. Every gesture was calculated. Every smile was fake. We ate dinner together, watched TV, got ready for bed. And the whole time, I was thinking about the offshore account. About $20,000 that used to be mine, now sitting in my sister's name. About the trust fund Ryan had tried to access, the millions he'd attempted to steal. But I was also thinking about something else. Something Rachel had said earlier when we were going over our next steps. She told me that people like Ryan and Morgan, people who conned others for a living, they always had a tell. A moment of overconfidence where they celebrated too early, where they let their guard down. We just had to wait for it. As I lay in bed that night, Ryan's arm around me, his breathing evening out into sleep, I realized what our next move had to be. We needed to make them think they'd won completely. We needed to give them a reason to celebrate. Because when they did, when they finally relaxed and thought they were safe, that's when they'd make their real mistake. That's when we'd catch them in a way they'd never see coming. I fell asleep that night planning their destruction. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I slept soundly. The opportunity came exactly 1 week later, and it came from the most unlikely source. My mother. She called me on a Tuesday morning while I was at work, her voice bright with excitement. She wanted to throw us a belated wedding reception, a big one. She'd been talking to some friends at her country club, and they all agreed that since so many people couldn't make it to Martha's Vineyard, we deserved a proper celebration here in Boston. She was thinking the Four Seasons. 200 guests, a weekend after next. My first instinct was to say no. The thought of celebrating my marriage while actively planning to destroy it felt obscene. But then Rachel's words came back to me. We needed them overconfident. We needed them to let their guard down. And what better way to do that than with a party? I told my mom it sounded perfect. Her joy was genuine, and it hurt. She had no idea what was coming. No idea that her youngest daughter had betrayed her oldest. No idea that in less than 2 weeks, our family would implode in front of everyone we knew. But this was the opening I needed. I called Rachel the moment I hung up with my mom. Explained the situation. She was quiet for a long moment, and I could practically hear the wheels turning in her head. Then she started laughing. Not a happy laugh. The kind of laugh you give when something is so darkly perfect, you can't help yourself. She told me it was brilliant. We'd use the party as the stage. Ryan and Morgan would be riding high, celebrating their successful con, surrounded by people they'd fooled. They'd feel invincible. And that's exactly when we'd reveal everything. The next 2 weeks were a blur of preparation. 2 kinds of preparation, actually. My mother was planning a party. I was planning an execution. During the day, I played the excited bride. I went with Mom to the Four Seasons to taste cakes and approve flower arrangements. I helped her finalize the guest list, which included everyone from our family. Ryan's supposed business associates, my coworkers, and basically anyone who'd ever known us. 200 people who would witness what was about to happen. During the nights, I worked with Rachel, David, and Marcus to build our presentation. Because that's what this was going to be. A presentation. We were going to lay out every piece of evidence in a way that was undeniable, irrefutable, devastating. Marcus had been busy. He'd compiled months of surveillance footage into a tight 15-minute video. Every meeting between Ryan and Morgan, every kiss. Every time they'd laughed at my expense, he'd even managed to get audio from a few of their conversations. The sound quality wasn't perfect, but it was good enough to hear Morgan telling Ryan that I was too trusting, too easy to manipulate. Hearing her say those words about me, in that casual tone, like I was just an obstacle in a game, did something to me. It burned away the last remnants of doubt, the last threads of love I might have still felt for her. David had prepared financial documents that told the story in numbers. The fake consulting business, the offshore accounts, the previous victims in Philadelphia and Seattle. He'd even found evidence that Ryan was planning to file for divorce exactly 6 months after the wedding, which would have given him legal claim to half of everything in some states. The man had thought of every angle, except the angle where I fought back. Rachel drafted the legal documents. Divorce papers, restraining orders, civil suit for fraud, criminal complaints. She'd coordinated with the district attorney's office, and there would be detectives at the party ready to make arrests. Everything had to be timed perfectly. But there was one more thing I needed to do. Something personal. I needed to face Ryan and Morgan together before the party. I needed to see them interact, to confirm with my own eyes that they were still conspiring, still planning. I needed that final piece of certainty before I destroyed both their lives. So I orchestrated it. I told Ryan that I wanted to have a small dinner party at our apartment. Just family. Him, me, my mom, and Morgan. A casual thing to celebrate before the big reception. Ryan loved the idea. Told me it was sweet, that he was so lucky to have me. Morgan agreed immediately when I called her. Said she wouldn't miss it for anything. The night of the dinner, I spent 3 hours in the kitchen preparing my dad's signature lasagna, the one he used to make for special occasions. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was using my dead father's recipe to set a trap for the people who were trying to steal his legacy. My mom arrived first with wine and stories about the party preparations. She was so excited, so happy. It broke my heart. Ryan came home from his fake job with flowers. Morgan showed up last, wearing a new dress I'd never seen before, probably bought with my money. We sat around my dining room table, the 4 of us, and ate dinner. It was surreal. My mother chattered about the guest list and the menu. Ryan told stories about his invented clients. Morgan laughed at all his jokes, but not too much. Just enough to seem friendly, not enough to seem suspicious. I watched them carefully, looking for signs, for tells, for any crack in their performance. And I found it was small. So small my mother didn't notice, but I did. Ryan reached for the salt at the same moment Morgan reached for the pepper. Their hands touched for maybe half a second, and they both pulled back quickly. But in that half second, I saw it. The familiarity, the intimacy, the way Morgan's fingers lingered just slightly, the way Ryan's eyes flicked to hers with something that looked almost like tenderness. They were still together, still in love, or whatever twisted version of love people like them were capable of. This wasn't just a business arrangement. There were feelings involved, which somehow made it worse. After dinner, my mom left early. She had an early morning appointment. Morgan offered to help with dishes, and I let her. We stood side by side at the sink, just like we had countless times growing up, and she asked me if I was happy. I told her I was. Happier than I'd ever been. She smiled and told me she could tell. That I was glowing. That marriage looked good on me. Then she said something that made my blood run cold. She told me that she'd always been a little jealous of me, but seeing me like this, so genuinely happy, made her realize that I deserved it. That I deserved every good thing that came my way. It was a confession. A twisted one, but a confession nonetheless. She was admitting her jealousy, but she was doing it while actively planning to rob me. She was absolving herself, preparing her own narrative for later. Poor Morgan, who was so jealous she made a terrible mistake. Except, it wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. A series of choices, and she'd made every single one deliberately. I hugged her when she left, told her I loved her, watched her walk down the hallway to the elevator, her new dress swishing around her legs, probably planning what she'd wear to Mexico when she and Ryan disappeared with my money. Ryan and I cleaned up the rest of the dishes in silence. He was distracted, checking his phone constantly. Probably texting Morgan now that she'd left. Probably feeling that high that comes from getting away with something right under someone's nose. That night in bed, he reached for me. Tried to initiate intimacy. I made an excuse about being tired, about my stomach hurting from too much lasagna. He accepted it icily, rolled over, fell asleep within minutes. But I lay awake staring at the ceiling, thinking about the party, about what was going to happen, about the look on their faces when they realized I knew everything. I thought about my mother, who was going to lose a daughter, about the family members who'd have to choose sides, about the spectacle it was all going to become. Part of me wondered if I should do this privately, quietly, without the audience. But then I remembered Morgan's words at lunch, about how lucky I was, about how Ryan was such a catch. I remembered Ryan's fake smiles and manufactured tenderness. I remembered every lie, every manipulation, every moment of gaslighting that made me question my own instincts. No, they'd chosen to do this publicly, to perform their con in front of everyone we knew. They'd made me look like a fool in front of my family, my friends, my community. They deserved a public reckoning. The night before the party, Marcus sent me the final surveillance package. He'd managed to capture something extraordinary. Ryan and Morgan together at a hotel in Cambridge just 2 days ago. The footage was crystal clear. You could see them checking in, see them kissing in the elevator, see Ryan carrying her into the room. They'd been together while Ryan came home to me every night. While Morgan texted me about wedding preparations, while both of them helped my mother plan this party, Marcus's message was simple. He told me he'd been doing this job for 20 years, and he'd never seen anything this cold-blooded. He said I deserved better, and he hoped what we were about to do would give me some peace. Peace. I didn't think I'd feel peaceful for a long time. But maybe I'd feel something else. Maybe I'd feel free. The morning of the party, Ryan was nervous. He kept checking his appearance in the mirror, adjusting his tie, asking if he looked okay. I told him he looked perfect, and he did. He looked exactly like the successful, devoted husband he was pretending to be. Morgan called me while we were getting ready, asked what I was wearing, said she didn't want to clash. Her thoughtfulness was staggering. She was worried about color coordination while preparing to help my husband rob me blind. I told her I was wearing navy blue. She said she'd wear something neutral then, Beige, maybe? Something that wouldn't stand out. That almost made me laugh. After tonight, she was going to stand out for the rest of her life. Just not in the way she expected. As Ryan and I got into our car to head to the Four Seasons, he reached over and squeezed my hand. Told me he was so excited to celebrate our marriage with everyone we loved, that this was going to be a night to remember. For once, he was telling the truth. This was absolutely going to be a night to remember. The ballroom at the Four Seasons looked like something out of a magazine. My mother had outdone herself. White orchids everywhere, champagne fountains, a string quartet playing in the corner. 200 people in their finest clothes, laughing and celebrating a marriage that was about to be exposed as a fraud. Ryan worked the room like a politician, shaking hands, accepting congratulations, playing the role of the devoted husband so convincingly that even I almost believed it. Almost. Morgan arrived fashionably late in a cream-colored dress that probably cost more than her monthly salary. She hugged me tight, told me I looked beautiful, and I felt nothing. No anger, no hurt, just a cold, clinical detachment. I'd already cried all my tears. Tonight was about justice. Rachel was there, blending into the crowd in a simple black dress, but I could see her positioning herself near the exits. Marcus had set up in the hotel's AV room, ready to play our presentation on the massive screens that were supposed to show our wedding photos. David was coordinating with 2 detectives from the Boston PD, who were waiting just outside the ballroom doors. Everything was in place. My mother clinked her glass at 8 o'clock, right on schedule. The room fell silent. She gave a beautiful speech about love and family, about how proud she was of me, about how Ryan was the son she never had. Every word was a knife in my chest, because I knew what was coming. I knew I was about to break her heart in front of everyone she knew, but I didn't have a choice. Not anymore. When my mother finished, she handed the microphone to Ryan. He thanked everyone for coming, made a few jokes that got polite laughs, and then he turned to me with this expression of pure adoration that would have fooled anyone who didn't know the truth. He told the crowd how lucky he was, how I was the most amazing woman he'd ever met, how he couldn't believe I'd chosen him. That last part, at least, was honest. He really couldn't believe how easy I'd made it for him. When Ryan finished, people expected me to say a few words. The bride's toast? I took the microphone from him, my hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. I started exactly how they expected. I thanked everyone for coming. Thanked my mother for putting together such a beautiful evening. Thanked Ryan for being such an attentive husband. Then I said something that made the room shift. I told everyone that tonight was about honesty, about truth, about showing the people we love who we really are. Ryan's smile flickered. Just for a second, but I saw it. I looked directly at him and told the room that I had something special prepared. A little presentation. Some photos and videos from our relationship that I wanted to share with everyone. Ryan's face went pale. Morgan, standing near the bar, had gone completely still. I signaled to Marcus, and the lights dimmed. The screens that had been showing our wedding photos went dark. Then the presentation began. It started with the surveillance footage. Ryan and Morgan at that Best Western. The timestamp was clear. July 15th, 2 months before our wedding, the room erupted in gasps and whispers. I watched my mother's face crumble in real time, watched her hand fly to her mouth. But I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. The next slide was financial records. Ryan's fake consulting business. The debt. The 2 previous women he'd conned. Amanda in Philadelphia, Rebecca in Seattle. Photos of them both, with their permission. They'd agreed to let me use their stories after Rachel had tracked them down. Then came the bank transfers. The offshore account in Morgan's name. The $20,000 Ryan had stolen from our joint account just 10 days ago. The attempted access to my trust fund. Each new piece of evidence hit the room like a bomb. People were standing now, craning to see the screens. I heard someone say my sister's name in disbelief. Heard Ryan's fake business associates realizing they'd been part of his cover story. Ryan tried to leave. He actually turned toward the exit, but the detectives were already there, blocking his path. He spun back toward me, and for the first time since I'd known him, I saw his real face. No charm, no warmth. Just cold calculation and fury. He told me I didn't understand. That I was making a mistake. That he could explain everything. I asked him which part he wanted to explain. The affair with my sister? The fake business? The 2 previous victims? The plan to steal my inheritance and disappear to Mexico? That last detail made Morgan bolt. He tried to run for the side exit, but Rachel was faster. She stepped directly into Morgan's path and told her, very calmly, that there were officers at every exit, and if she tried to leave, she'd just be adding fleeing to her list of charges. Morgan looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw something in her eyes that might have been regret. Or maybe it was just regret at getting caught. I'd never know, and honestly, I didn't care anymore. The final slide was the evidence I'd kept as my trump card. The text messages between Ryan and Morgan, not the ones about logistics or meeting times. The personal ones. The ones where they laughed about me. Where Morgan called me naive and stupid. Where Ryan made jokes about how easy I was to manipulate. There was one message in particular that I let stay on screen for a full minute. Morgan had sent it the night before our wedding. She told Ryan that she almost felt bad about what they were doing to me, but then she remembered that I'd always had everything. And maybe it was time someone took something from me for once. The room was completely silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Everyone was staring at the screens, then at me, then at Ryan and Morgan. My mother made a sound I'll never forget. A sort of wounded animal cry. She looked at Morgan with so much pain and betrayal that even I felt it. My sister, her baby girl, had done this. Had helped destroy our family for money. I took the microphone again. My voice was steady, clear. I told the room that I'd filed for divorce that morning, that criminal charges were being pressed against both Ryan and Morgan for fraud, conspiracy, and attempted theft. That restraining orders had been issued. Then I said something I'd practiced 100 times in front of my mirror. I told everyone that I'd invited them here tonight not just to celebrate a marriage, but to bear witness to the truth. To see with their own eyes what these two people had done. So there would be no confusion, no rumors, no opportunity for them to spin a different story later. I wanted everyone to know exactly who Ryan and Morgan were. The detectives moved in then. They approached Ryan first, asking him to come with them. He looked around the room, at all the faces staring at him with disgust and shock. And I saw the moment he realized he'd lost. Completely and irrevocably lost. He turned to me one last time, told me I'd regret this, that I was making a huge mistake, that I had no idea what I was doing. But I knew exactly what I was doing. I was taking back my life. They handcuffed him right there in the ballroom. Ryan Thompson, the charming consultant, the devoted husband, being led away in handcuffs while 200 people watched. Some were filming on their phones. By tomorrow, this would be all over social media. His face, his name, his crimes would be public knowledge. Good. Let the next woman he targeted know exactly who she was dealing with. Morgan didn't go quietly. She screamed at me that I was a selfish bitch, that I'd always thought I was better than her, that I'd ruined her life. The detectives had to physically restrain her as they read her rights. My mother just stood there watching, tears streaming down her face. One daughter being arrested while the other watched impassively. I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no relief, no vindication, just emptiness. As they led Morgan past me, she spit at my feet. Told me I'd never understand what it was like to be in my shadow, to always be second best, to watch me have everything while she had nothing. I looked at my sister, at this person I'd loved and protected my entire life, and I told her the truth. I told her she was right. I'd never understand that, because I'd never been the kind of person who dealt with jealousy by destroying someone else's life. That shut her up. The detectives led her away, and suddenly the ballroom erupted in noise. People talking, shouting, some crying. My mother collapsed into a chair, and several of her friends rushed to her side. Rachel appeared at my elbow, asked if I was okay. I told her I needed air. I walked out of that ballroom, past the shocked guests, past the hotel staff who'd witnessed everything, out onto the terrace that overlooked Boston Common. The city stretched out below me, lights twinkling in the darkness, completely indifferent to the drama that had just unfolded. I stood there for a long time, breathing in the cool October air, letting the reality of what I'd just done sink in. I'd just blown up my entire life in front of 200 people. I'd destroyed my sister's future. I'd broken my mother's heart. I'd turned my private pain into public spectacle. And yet, for the first time in months, I could breathe. Rachel found me eventually. She brought me champagne and told me that the party was breaking up, that most people were leaving, that I should probably go talk to my mother. I asked her if it was over, if we'd won. She told me the legal battle was just beginning, but yes, we'd won. Ryan and Morgan would both face criminal charges. The evidence was overwhelming. They'd likely take plea deals to avoid trial, but either way, they'd have records. They'd never be able to do this to anyone else. I drank the champagne and stared at the city and thought about tomorrow, about the headlines, about the gossip, about rebuilding a life from the ashes of this one. But that was tomorrow's problem. Tonight, I'd done what I set out to do. I'd exposed the truth. I'd fought back. I'd refused to be a victim. And that, I realized, was enough. 3 months later, I'm sitting in my new apartment in Soho, watching the sun rise over Manhattan, and I barely recognize the person I've become. The divorce was finalized 6 weeks ago. Ryan tried to fight it at first, tried to claim he deserved something, but his lawyer took one look at the evidence and advised him to sign whatever I put in front of him. He did. He's currently serving 18 months for fraud and conspiracy. Could have been worse, but he took a plea deal. His face is all over the internet now. Warnings on dating fraud websites, articles about his pattern of targeting wealthy women. Amanda and Rebecca both came forward publicly after my story broke. 3 more women contacted me privately. Turns out Ryan had been doing this for almost a decade. He'll never work a con again. At least, not successfully. Morgan got 12 months and 3 years probation. She's in a minimum security facility in Massachusetts. My mother tried to visit her once. Morgan refused to see her. I think that hurt Mom more than anything else. Not the betrayal itself, but Morgan's refusal to even pretend she was sorry. Mom and I are slowly rebuilding our relationship. It's not easy. She keeps asking me why I didn't tell her privately, why I had to expose everything so publicly. I've tried to explain that Ryan and Morgan were planning to disappear, that I needed witnesses, that I needed everyone to know the truth so they couldn't spin it later. She says she understands, but I can see the hurt in her eyes. She lost a daughter that night. We both did. Some of my extended family sided with Morgan, told me I was cruel, that I could have handled it differently. That family should forgive family. I don't talk to those people anymore. Real family doesn't help con artists rob you blind. Real family doesn't choose the criminal over the victim. The hardest part hasn't been dealing with Ryan and Morgan. It's been dealing with myself, with the person I had to become to fight them. The calculating, cold, strategic version of me that set traps and planned public humiliation. Sometimes I look in the mirror and wonder if I went too far, if I let their cruelty turn me into someone cruel too. Rachel tells me I'm being too hard on myself. That protecting yourself isn't cruelty, it's survival. That what I did at that party wasn't revenge, it was exposure. There's a difference, she says. Revenge is about making someone suffer. Exposure is about preventing future suffering. I'm trying to believe her. The viral attention was overwhelming at first. The video from the party spread everywhere. People called me brave, called me a hero, said I was an inspiration. But they didn't see the nights I spent crying so hard I couldn't breathe. Didn't see the panic attacks when I'd wake up at 3 a.m., convinced I'd dreamed it all. That Ryan was still in bed next to me, still playing his long game. Therapy helps. I go 3 times a week now. Dr. Sarah Chin specializes in trauma from intimate partner fraud. Yes, that's apparently common enough to have specialists. She's helping me understand that what Ryan did wasn't just theft. It was abuse. Psychological manipulation designed to make me doubt my own reality. Gaslighting on a massive scale. She's also helping me forgive myself for not seeing it sooner. For ignoring the red flags. For being so desperate to believe in love that I handed my trust to someone who saw it as a weapon to use against me. But something unexpected came from all this attention. Women started reaching out to me. Dozens at first, then hundreds. Women who'd been conned by romantic partners, by family members, by people they trusted. Women who'd lost money, lost homes, lost their sense of self. Women who felt stupid and ashamed and alone. I answered every single message. That's actually how the business started. I was helping so many women navigate financial fraud cases that Rachel suggested we make it official. We opened Verified Trust Consulting 6 weeks ago. It's a firm that helps women protect their assets before and after marriage. We do financial background checks, prenuptial agreements, and fraud investigation. We work with a network of private investigators and forensic accountants. We help women verify the people they love before they hand over their trust. The name was Rachel's idea. She said trust should be verified, not blind. That love doesn't mean abandoning common sense. That protecting yourself isn't cynical. It's smart. We've already helped 12 women discover they were being targeted by con artists, helped them get out before they got hurt, before they stood in a ballroom watching their lives explode in front of 200 people. If my nightmare can prevent someone else's, maybe it wasn't all for nothing. I bought this apartment with some of the money I saved by catching Ryan before he could steal everything. It's smaller than the place I shared with him, but it's mine. Every piece of furniture, every painting, every decision. No compromises, no joint checking accounts, no shared anything. Some people would call this trust issues. I call it wisdom. I'm dating again, which surprises me. Nothing serious. Just coffee dates and museum trips with men who've been thoroughly vetted by Marcus. Yes, I make Marcus run background checks on anyone I consider going out with more than once. Rachel says this is excessive. I say it's reasonable. There's this one guy, James. He's a high school history teacher, drives a 10-year-old Honda, lives in a rent-controlled apartment in Queens. Has a detailed credit report I've already reviewed. He's patient with my questions, doesn't push for more than I'm ready to give, and he's never once mentioned my money. We'll see. Maybe, possibly. I'm not making any promises. The thing is, Ryan didn't just steal my money and my sister. He stole my ability to trust easily, to love without fear, to believe that people are fundamentally good. I'm working on getting that back, but it's slow, it's hard. Some days, I wonder if I'll ever be able to be vulnerable again without calculating the risk. Dr. Chen says that's okay. That caution isn't the same as cynicism, that I can be open-hearted without being naive, that what happened to me doesn't have to define every relationship I have for the rest of my life. I'm trying to believe that too. Last week I got a letter from Morgan. The prison forwarded it to my lawyer, who forwarded it to me. I let it sit on my kitchen counter for 3 days before I opened it. Part of me hoped it was an apology, a real one, an acknowledgement of what she'd done and why it was wrong. It wasn't. Morgan's letter was full of justifications. She told me I'd never understand what it was like being my sister, always second best, always in my shadow. She said she'd spent her whole life watching me succeed while she struggled. That when Ryan approached her with the plan, it felt like finally, she was getting something that was supposed to be mine. She didn't apologize once. She just explained. Like, I was supposed to understand that her jealousy justified her betrayal. I threw the letter away. Some people don't change. Some people will always believe they're the victim in their own story, no matter what they've done to others. Morgan is one of those people. And I need to accept that the sister I thought I had never really existed. She was always this person. I just didn't want to see it. That's probably the hardest truth I've had to accept. That I didn't just misjudge Ryan, I misjudged Morgan too. I spent 29 years believing in a relationship that was fundamentally unequal, where I gave and she took, where I protected and she resented. I can't get those years back, but I can make sure the next 29 are different. My mother asked me last week if I ever regretted it. The public exposure, the party, the way I handled everything. She asked if I wished I'd done it quietly, privately, without the spectacle. I told her the truth. No, I don't regret it, because doing it quietly would have given them power, would have let them control the narrative, would have made my pain private while their crimes stayed hidden. They chose to con me publicly, to perform their fake love in front of everyone I knew. They chose to make me look like a fool at my own wedding, during my honeymoon, at family dinners. I just returned the favor. Sometimes at night, when I can't sleep, I think about that moment in the ballroom, when the lights dimmed and the presentation started, when I saw Ryan's face go pale and Morgan try to run, when 200 people gasped in collective shock. I think about the power I felt, the control. After months of being manipulated and lied to, of feeling helpless and stupid, I finally had the upper hand. And I'm not going to lie, it felt good. Maybe that makes me petty. Maybe that makes me vindictive. But it felt really good to watch them face consequences for once. Dr. Chun says that's normal. That wanting justice isn't the same as wanting revenge. That it's okay to feel satisfaction when bad people face appropriate consequences for their actions. I'm trying to believe that most of all, this morning I got a text from a woman named Sophie. She's 26, engaged to a guy who seems perfect. But something feels off. His stories don't quite add up. He's vague about his past. He's pushing hard to combine finances before the wedding. She found my story online and reached out. Asked if I could help, I told her yes. Gave her Rachel's number, Marcus's number, told her about our firm. Told her that trusting her instincts doesn't make her paranoid, it makes her smart. That love shouldn't require you to ignore red flags. She thanked me. Said I might have just saved her life. And that's when I realized something. Ryan and Morgan took a lot from me. My innocence, my trust, my belief in the goodness of people. They damaged my relationship with my mother. They stole months of my life that I spent planning a future that was based on lies. But they also gave me something. They gave me purpose. They gave me the ability to help other women avoid what I went through. They gave me a strength I didn't know I had. They tried to destroy me, and instead they forged me into someone stronger. So, yeah, I sleep like a baby now. Not because I got revenge, but because I know that every woman I help is one more person who doesn't have to stand in a ballroom watching her life explode. One more person who catches the con before it catches her. Ryan's in prison. Morgan's in prison. I'm in Soho, running a business, building a life, and helping women protect themselves from people like them. You tell me who won. If you've made it this far in my story, thank you for listening. I know it wasn't easy to hear, but I needed to tell it. Needed to say out loud that this happened, that I survived it, that I'm okay now. More than okay. I'd love to know where you're hearing this from. Drop a comment and tell me what city you're in. It helps me remember that I'm not alone in this. That there are people out there who understand, who've been through similar things, who are still fighting their way back to trust. And if you want to follow along with more stories like mine, stories about survival and strength and fighting back, you can subscribe right here. That way you won't miss anything, because there are more stories to tell. More women who need to know they're not alone. We're all in this together. And together, we're stronger than any con artist who thinks they can break us. Trust me on that.